Hi there everyone and welcome to another episode of Tip of the Week. Before I get started today, I just want to let you guys know that you might want to take a look at the Toon Boom site over the next 2 weeks because Toon Boom is on promotion this week and next week. All promotions are going to be ending on August 31st, but you might notice this week we're having upgrade and cross-grade promotions, and there's some Toon Boom Studio promotions that are going on, and then next week we're going to have our new license sale. So just so you guys know, this is the most aggressive pricing that we have in the entire year. So if you're looking at upgrading, cross-grading, or picking up a few new licenses, now is the time to do it. Now, I'm going to go over today pencil lines. And I had some people asking me some questions recently about how the new pencil lines work and how the pressure sensitivity works and how you can apply thickness and lines across different lines and different images. So I've just loaded up the sample material here that you can actually download from Toon Boom Animate. It's the Minotaur project that has some frame-by-frame animation in it. Or you can start with your own drawing, and I'll also do some examples on the side. So basically, if you look at the new pencil tool, the pencil tool in Animate and Animate Pro now does also support the pressure sensitivity just like it does in Harmony. If you are a Harmony user, you'll notice that the tool properties do look a little bit different because we have updated the tool properties in Animate and Animate Pro to be more similar to what we're doing in Storyboard Pro. And these changes will migrate to Toon Boom Harmony as well in the next major version that we have of that as well. So the concept is the same though. Even though the tool properties look slightly different, the way that the pencil tool functions is the same from Harmony to Animate and Animate Pro. So basically what happens is when you're working with the pencil tool, I'm just going to draw a line on the side here. And I'm using an Intuos tablet. You can also use a Cintiq, or you could even use a mouse. And I'm going to talk to you about using a mouse shortly. But for the moment, I'm drawing with my Intuos tablet, and I press harder and I get my pressure sensitivity. If I want to change the maximum size of my brush on the fly, if I hold down O and then I click and drag, then I can see the maximum size represented by a circle, and this allows me then to, on the fly, change the thickness of my brush. So if I press lightly, I get a thinner line, and then if I press heavier, I get a thicker line. With Animate and Animate Pro, you have here this concept of the current brush that shows on the top. And so if you click on the arrow next to the current brush, this pops up the total tool properties. In Harmony, you see all the properties all the time, so you don't really need to worry about this. But the one thing that I want to point out here is minimum size. So minimum size is now done as a percentage of maximum size. And what this means is that when you change your maximum size, the minimum size is always going to be 11% of that maximum size. And so it preserves the overall integrity or the overall shape of your line. So if you want to go back and change the minimum size, you really should go inside this tool properties window here. And then if you want to save these new properties now to reuse, let's say that I want to set this to be like, 5%, and I want my maximum size to be 50, and I want to save this now so that I can reuse it later. I can always click on the new brush or new preset button there, and I can call this Pencil Lily. And when I see now in my tool properties, I can check out that I've got that new pencil that's been added at the end of the list. So now if I use this pencil, I get my pressure sensitivity. I can always click to a different pencil, do something, and then I can come back to the Pencil Lily that I saved, and I get back to the same properties that I had before. And so it's a lot easier to use, and if you change the maximum size in your current brush, it doesn't change it in the preset as well. So that's new, and that's different from Harmony. So that way you can really keep your presets integral. So now if I click on the preset again, it brings me back to that value. So it's really a lot better for keeping a standard set of brushes that you want to reuse all the time. And you just have to be aware of that so that as you're working that you make sure that you save out the brushes that you do want to reuse so that you can quickly access them. But it's a good thing because it's sort of automatically locking those brushes so you're not accidentally overwriting them as you're working with your current brush. So pressure sensitivity makes a lot of sense. But I had somebody ask me last week, so what about when you're working with a mouse, for example? If I work with my mouse here, and I draw a line, I have no pressure sensitivity on that line. And the reason is that a mouse doesn't have that information of pressure sensitivity. Well, this is where we come into this concept of what we call in Animate and Animate Pro, what we call thickness stencils. This is also in Harmony called the pencil template. We decided to rename it from pencil template to thickness stencil because we thought the thickness stencil kind of evoked a little bit more graphically what that means. So a stencil is something that you apply to multiple different things, right? Like if you create a stencil on paper and you kind of stamp out what you want to have happen, it's always the same stamp that you're stamping out. So we took that concept and applied it now to the length of the line. So with a thickness stencil, what happens is when you use a thickness stencil, it overwrites the pressure sensitivity information that you're using. So let's take this as an example with my mouse. If I draw the same line with my mouse, if I let go of my mouse, as soon as I let go, you see that it applied a thick and thin on there. Let's do it again by just sort of raising up the maximum size to make it a lot more obvious. As I let go of my mouse, it applies the thickness stencil to the line. So what it does is it discards the information from your pressure sensitivity. Even if you use a tablet, now I'm going back to my tablet, if I have pressure sensitivity on my line, it's going to discard that pressure sensitivity information in favor of the stencil. So when you look in the tool properties here, a thickness stencil is represented by this bit of a squiggly line here. And if you're working in Toon Boom Harmony, then you see the thickness stencil or the pencil template is a totally separate item. So you have a drop-down list for your presets, and you have a separate drop-down list for your pencil templates. We decided to put everything in one list here to make it a little bit easier to work and to choose the options that you're using when you're working in Animate and Animate Pro. So let's say I want to use a thickness stencil. The thing you might say is, okay, basically what I'm probably going to do as a production workflow is I'm going to define all of the thicknesses of my final clean lines at the beginning of the production. And this way you can maintain a consistency in the look and feel so that you don't get too much wobble or you don't get too much variation in the thickness of your lines. So let's say if I want to take the one on the top here that I have, it's just a line. I just drew it with no thickness on it, and I haven't really done anything with this line. I can turn this line into a new thickness stencil. So let me show you how we do that. First of all, what you want to do when you're going to create a thickness stencil is you want to take the line that you're using and you want to create the thickness that you want to reuse on this line. So the way that you do that, if you ever want to modify the thickness of a line after you've drawn it, then this is what you have this handy pencil editor for, which is nested underneath the contour editor tool. And by the way, if you want to not have these tools nested, there is also a preference that you can activate in your preferences that's called flat toolbar. And when you have flat toolbar enabled, if you right click on the toolbar, this customize option will not be grayed out. The reason this customize option is grayed out right now is because when you have nested tools underneath here, you can't customize it. These are the default way that they are. As soon as you turn it into a flat toolbar, now this gives you the opportunity to customize your toolbar and only show the tools that you want to show. So just be aware of that. Going back to my line here, I'm ready now to modify the thickness of this line. If I just drag over the line with my thickness or with my pencil editor, what this does is it shows the thickness key points on the line. So right now I only have 2 thickness key points. I have a thickness key point at each end. And just to show you how this works here, let me zoom in on this line a little bit more so we can see how it looks. So if I look at this line, I can modify one side of the line simply by dragging on that thickness key point. I can hold down Shift and I can modify both sides of the line at the same time. And I can also add new thickness key points along the length of the line. So just like with the contour editor, it's the same shortcuts. If you hold down Command or Control on Windows, this allows you to add thickness key points. And then I can go in there and I can modify, the one in the middle if I want to do something crazy like this. And if you want to remove a thickness key point, you simply select the thickness key point by dragging around it, and then you hit delete, and that removes that key point. So you can really finesse what your key points look like. If you go to, let's draw another line without using a thickness stencil here. I'm just going to go back to my pencil tool, and I will go back to Pencil Lily, which is the one that does maintain my thickness information from my tablet. So as I draw now, if I draw with thick and thin, then if I select my line with the pencil editor here, I see that there are a number of thickness key points on this line. So what happens is, as you're drawing with your pencil tool, it will assign the fewest number of thickness key points that it needs in order to maintain the integrity of the line that you drew. So just like with the contour editor, if I switch to my contour editor, it tries to optimize this line by putting as few contour points as it needs to maintain the shape of that line. And if you look in your pencil tool, you have some areas here where you can adjust how this is. So the smoothing adjusts the smoothing that's based with the contour editor, so it adjusts the overall path of your line, whereas the contour smoothing will adjust the outside smoothing of the line. In other words, the contour smoothing will adjust how many thickness key points it puts. So the higher it is, the less key points you get, but also the higher it is, the more it might change the shape of your line. So if you really want it to maintain exactly the way that you drew it, you can put these guys all the way down, but beware, because if you put them all the way down and you draw something, you may end up with a lot more key points than you intended. And here it's not so bad actually, but depending on how shaky your line is, you may get a lot of thickness key points and a lot of contour points. Okay, so that being said, now we understand that the pencil editor sets the thickness key points, and we also understand how we can add key points by hitting Control, how we can remove them by hitting Delete. So now what I want to do is I really want to optimize this line so that I can reuse it throughout my production. So sometimes it's easier to do this, by the way, just by simply drawing a straight line with your line tool and holding down Shift. That way you see a basic line that doesn't have any curve on it, so you can really kind of analyze what you want this line to look like. So taking my line here, what I can do is I can set some key points in the center, and then if I want to have tapering on the ends, I can hold down Shift and taper those out, for example like this. And I had somebody recently that really wanted to have a nice curve on the end of this line so that it doesn't kind of shape the way that it's shaped right now. And you can always go in there, and you can even hold down Shift as you do this if you want to do this sort of on both sides, and you can adjust the shape of that point so that it really goes down. So you can see the difference here from the left side to the right side. This is a bit of a nicer looking shape than this one. So if I want to adjust this one now, I can do the same thing holding down Shift, and I can just kind of drag those Bezier points towards each other and just adjust this line to look however it is that you want it to look. So just to make this really obvious what I'm doing, I'm going to make a new brush that also has a dip in the center, just because I want it to be really obvious that this is my new template. So let's say that this now is how I want all my lines to look in my project. More likely, you're just going to have a line that has tapering on the ends, but let's use this as an example. If I want to save this as a new thickness stencil that I can reuse in my project, I simply select my line here, and if you go into the presets area here, with the select tool activated, you have this pencil selection area. The pencil selection area only shows up when you select a pencil line. So in other words, if I select a brush line that I've drawn, so just drawing a brush line, if I select a brush line, I don't see pencil selection here because it's not a pencil line. If I do select a pencil line, then now this pencil selection area shows up in my tool properties window. And from here, I can always adjust the maximum size of the line after I've drawn it if I need to make some changes. And I can adjust the minimum size if I want to really make it a lot less or whatever. And once you get the line looking exactly the way that you want it, you can select it with your select tool. And down here is where you can add a new thickness stencil. So it's in the presets area. If you click on the new thickness stencil, it looks like a pencil with a T. So if I click on the new pencil And it's the same icon for pencil template and harmony as well. So you can create a new pencil template or a new thickness stencil. By default, it simply adds it with a default name and it adds it at the end of the list. So knowing this, you can always go in there afterwards and you can select the stencil that you want to use, and you can always rename the stencil. So I could call this thickness stencil Lily. And you don't really see the full name because it has to be truncated a little bit, so because it just can't quite display it. I think if I make my area a little bit larger, then I see the whole thing. But depending on how small your screen size is, it might be truncated. So you might want to kind of maybe I can rename it like maybe a TS Lily. That way I know. Let's do TS space Lily. And so I know this is thickness stencil Lily, and I see it at the end. And I can also tell that it's a thickness stencil because it has this icon on it. So now you might say, okay, well that's great, but how do I actually use this thing? So now that I've got my thickness stencil applied, I can use it one of two ways. I can either select a line that's already been drawn and then click on the thickness stencil, which applies it to that line. Or I can simply use my pencil tool and I can select the new thickness stencil that's at the end of the list, and I can draw my lines. And you see as you draw them that it does overwrite the thickness information with that new stencil. So hopefully that makes sense. And this came up recently because somebody wanted to use a mouse and they wanted to carefully control how the thickness information works on the lines. Similar to how they were doing it in Illustrator. So this is an interesting way that you can use that thickness stencil information. One other thing I want to give you on the subject of thickness and pencil lines is the concept of being able to copy and paste thickness from one line to another. So let's say, for example, I have this really nice looking line that I organized the thickness information for earlier. So if I look at the line, I can see the thickness stencil looks really nice on this line, or the thickness information is not a stencil, it's just key points at this point. The key points look really nice on this line. So if I want to, I can always select a line with my pencil editor tool, and I can hit Control C or Command C for copy, and then I can select another line and I can hit Command C or Command V or Control V for paste. And so now you see how that actually whoops, let's not click the help button while I'm working. So you can see how that actually copies and pastes now the thickness information. And once you have it stored by copying it, you don't have to copy it again, you can just simply paste it. And you can even select a variety of lines at the same time and hit paste as well. So in fact, you can actually select all the lines in your drawing if you want to and hit paste, and it will apply that new thickness information to the entire drawing. Not only can you do that for one drawing, but when you save it as a new thickness stencil, you can also apply that stencil to many different drawings at the same time. So let's say, actually let's do this. Let's save this as a new stencil again. So just to practice, I am selecting my line and clicking the Add New Thickness Stencil button, which is adding a new stencil at the end. And I think I needed to select that with my pencil editor tool. Still check that one. There we go. Now I've got the correct thickness stencil there. So I can, if I want to rename this guy, let's rename it to Thickness Stencil Great. And so now I've got my great thickness stencil there. So let's say if I want to apply this not just to one drawing, but if I want to apply it to a series of drawings, let's just take a look. Let's zoom in on this drawing to make sure that we understand how it looks. So if I look at this drawing right now, I see clearly how the thickness information here looks. And then I'm going to go back now to the first drawing, and I can select with my select tool. And we have this option here that's called the permanent selection. And when you do permanent selection, if I do a big selection like this, I can actually just kind of scroll through the frames to make sure I've selected everything. So you see what permanent selection does is it selects everything within that dragged area for all the frames in your timeline. So if I make sure that my area is big enough, then I can apply certain things to multiple drawings in my timeline. So now I've made sure that I've selected everything I wanted to select. And let's say now if I want to do an operation on all of the drawings, then this is where we have this handy thing that's called apply to multiple drawings. So I can apply to multiple drawings, and then I can now go in here and click on my thickness stencil. And then if you go through and look at all of the drawings in here, you'll see that all of the drawings now have the new stencil applied. So you can see on the same drawings that I was looking at before a second ago, it has the new stencil applied. So you might think, oh, well, that's pretty cool, but maybe I don't want this thick and thin applied to all my drawings. Usually what you would use this for is if you want to change, for example, the maximum thickness on all your drawings at once. This happens actually fairly frequently, I'd say, where you might have done an entire sequence of frame-by-frame animation, and you figure out later on that you want to change the camera distance and you need the thickness to be different. So you can always simply even select with your permanent selection all the drawings that you want to. Make sure you turn on apply to multiple drawings again. This tool turns itself off after one use. And there's a reason for that because sometimes when you turn it on, we used to have it on permanently when you turn it on, and people might forget that they've got that on, and then they end up kind of messing up the rest of their animation. So it turns itself off every time you apply something. And there is a shortcut that you can use to turn that back on again. So let's say if I want to go in here and I want to just change the maximum size, then you see actually even after I do that, it pops itself back off again. And so certain things will be able to be applied to multiple drawings, and certain things work on only the current selected drawing. And in Harmony, when you change the size, you also have an apply button, and when you hit apply with apply to multiple drawings on, then it applies it to all the drawings in your series. So the best way in Animate and Animate Pro to change the thickness of multiple lines at the same time is to go in here and create a new thickness stencil and simply apply it to all your drawings. So it's a very strong, very powerful feature, and it's just one of the new tools that are available in Animate and Animate Pro version 3. So I hope that was useful for you guys and explains a little bit more about why the pencil tool is great. And I haven't even talked to you guys yet about applying different styles and different textures to your lines. So definitely play around with that as well. And there are a number of preset textures that are available in the software by default, but you can also load in your own by clicking on the plus sign here. You can browse to your own texture and bring it in. So I will go over that as well in another tip later on. But for now, have fun working with the pencil lines, and I look forward to seeing what you guys do. Have a great week.